September 1st, 2020. We got through August, we got through July, and finally September. Of course, this bullshit continues and only gets worse. The last 6 months. March, April, May, June, July, August. It's been 6 months of this bullshit. And it only gets deeper and deeper and deeper. With the whole world simply involved in non-thinking compliance. That's what our world has come down to. Our society has come down to simply non-thinking compliance. That's all it is. We're just robots. We're just robots who do as we are told. Don't ask questions. Don't think. It's considered a crime to think. It's considered an offense against the invisible masters. We don't even know who they are. We don't know their names. We don't know their faces. It's not Trump. Trump is just a sideshow. Trump is not the one calling the shots. Trump is not the one telling you you have to do this and you have to do that and you can't do this and do that. Trump was taking a lot of flack for not being compliant enough. And that particular flack is the one thing that I think is a saving grace. The one thing that might save us from this whole bullshit. This whole stinking ocean of bullshit that we're drowning in might be from the unexpected direction of somebody like Donald Trump, who by not being a team player, the very thing that made him seem like he was some kind of a threat to us, might be the saving grace, the thing that's going to save us. I certainly think he seems to me to be less dangerous than the guy the Democrats are going to put to run against him. And the way things have been going, we have not had a one-term president since 1992, which is 28 years ago. So of the last 7 presidencies of 4 years each, Clinton had 2 terms, Bush had 2 terms, Obama had 2 terms, and I think at this point we'd be better off keeping our fingers crossed that Trump has 2 terms, because the asshole that they've got running against him seems to me a lot scarier. Even though I initially didn't like Trump at all, and I still, not saying I have to like him. I don't have to like him to recognize that he may well be the lesser of 2 evils. That he might be, it's like you're caught between 2 different threats. You're caught between a fire and some other flood, let's say. And one is easier to survive than the other. You might survive the flood if you get something to float on. But the fire is going to burn the hell out of you. You won't survive that. You might survive a flood if you get on something that floats. And I think that's what Trump is. He's something that floats. He's not anything great to be on, but he's a lot better than going through the fire, which we're most likely to do with that asshole that's running against him. But the world is not, or at least our experiences of the world, is not entirely who the fuck is the president. Although we can never entirely get away from that either. And that's a good question. I mean, who the fuck are any of these people who are presuming to boss us all around and tell us what we have to do, what we can't do? Most of them, we don't even know them. I mean, even the fucking politicians. Aside from them, there's a whole bunch of people that are not elected at all that are the people with real power that are dictating to these politicians who are then dictating to us. So it's been 6 months of this bullshit, and each one of us tries to survive according to our own character and our own perceptions. And one thing that is undeniable is that my perceptions are not the same as the perceptions of the majority. That's undeniable. You can say I'm wrong, but you can't say that my perceptions are the same as everyone else, because they are certainly not. And that's the problem, is if you're not with the majority, then the majority will automatically, by being the majority, outnumber you. And if decisions made, judgments made about what is true and what is not true is made by the consensus of majority, then the majority is always going to be right, and anybody who disagrees with the majority is automatically going to be wrong by that measure of thinking, by that standard. But it's not true at all. And Henry Thoreau, who lived in Concord, Massachusetts, not many miles from where I live, where I was born, had this quote in his book, Civil Disobedience. Any man more right than his neighbors constitutes a majority of one already. More right than his neighbors. And I look around at my neighbors here, not far from Concord, Massachusetts. 160 years after Thoreau wrote that work, Civil Disobedience, during the time that he was speaking out for abolition before the Civil War in the 1850s. Any man more right than his neighbors constitutes a majority of one already. And if Henry Thoreau were alive today, 160 years later, what would he be saying now? Looking around at the mindless conformity. What about the need for civil disobedience? Because 50 years ago even, during the Vietnam War, there were people, not necessarily for the most altruistic of motives. There were many people in this country protesting the war in Vietnam because they didn't want to get drafted and have to go over there and get killed or get maimed or have to kill other people or just have to play that whole crazy, pointless, sick game. There was a certain amount of civil disobedience. There were protests. There were people willing to do things that were, minor trespasses on the law. For instance, let's say you make some graffiti. I mean, I really am so tempted to make some big graffiti somewhere in protest right now, but I know, of course, if I were to do that and if I were to get caught by the coppers, by the enforcing thugs, of our goons of our society, they would say, well, defacement of private property, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? We really fucking need some civil disobedience. We need some disobedience, because all we have is fucking obedience, mindless obedience, unthinking obedience, and you can't even ask a question to these robots and even get any response at all. I cannot ask a question to any of these mindless robots that are my neighbors, compared to whom I consider that I am more right than they are, because they have nothing to be right about. All they do is follow orders. And if I ask one of them a question, a simple, pragmatic, rational, logical question, they don't even say, no, I don't want to talk to you. No, I don't care to answer that question. No, I'm busy. I don't have time. I can't be bothered. They don't even say that much. They don't even decline, even rudely decline to answer. They just walk away saying nothing, because they're fucking robots without the ability to even speak, to even create self-directed speech. They are no longer human beings. They're just fucking programmed robots. They're not even thinking. And the simple question is this. This is the unspoken elephant in the middle of the room. Why am I not dead? That's part A. And part B, why, on top of being not dead, am I not even the least bit sick? After 6 months of this bullshit, after 6 months of this worldwide paranoia about some microscopic virus, which we are constantly, from the moment you were conceived, from the moment that you were born, you were constantly surrounded by trillions and trillions of all kinds of viruses, because that's the way the world is. That's why we have an immune system. We have immune systems to keep us healthy in the midst of a complete sea, a complete ocean of bacteria, viruses, microorganisms of all sorts, probably even some forms of threats that even modern medical science hasn't even identified yet. We have identified viruses and bacteria and single-celled organisms and things like that. You've been living that since the day you were born, but all of a sudden, whatever age you are, all of a sudden in this year of 2020, it all became an issue that we have to be totally paranoid about the microorganisms that may be present. We don't even know. Just because they may be present, we're playing this game of cooties. That's all it is, invisible cooties. When we were kids, we played this game of cooties about something that was invisible and unspecified. All we knew was we were supposed to be scared about it. So we pointed to some other kid that for some reason they didn't like, or felt that they were an outsider, or they different in some way, and they would say, "Oh, so and so has cooties," and all the other kids would go, "Ah!" running, screaming away from the person who had been pointed at and declared to have cooties. All the other kids would go running around in a panic or a mock panic. Ah, he has cooties! Stay away! Oh my God, he has cooties! And sometimes they would even get violent. Sometimes, if they were playing the game too seriously and forgetting that it's a game, they would start throwing rocks at the kid who had cooties. How many times has that happened? Well, it's happening now. It's happening now with the same kids who now have been around for 30, 40, 50 years and never grew up mentally, and they're playing that game, and there's incidents now. There was a news item a few weeks ago about a couple in, I think, Seattle, who threw hot coffee at some guy because he wasn't wearing a face mask. So this couple speaking like McDonald's or Starbucks coffee, threw this hot coffee at this guy's, I think, at his face because he wasn't wearing a face mask. He wasn't playing the cooties game. He wasn't being an obedient robot. And these ignorant, superstitious, medieval-minded fucks think, oh, well, he has the cooties, he has the evil eye, and we have to stone him. And fortunately, this couple apparently got arrested, which is how it got in as a news item. But this is the medieval, superstitious mentality we're living in. But we're not living in the medieval ages. If we were living even in the 1800s right now, and we did not have the medical means to identify the presence of a virus, which we have now through super microscopes and all kinds of testing, they didn't have that in the 1800s, 200 years ago. At 200 years ago, telling everybody they have to wear a face mask to protect themselves against this mysterious, invisible thing that was microscopic, that maybe one day science would develop the tools to be able to see microscopic things, but now in the 1850s, we're not able to see those things, and so we have to all protect ourselves in the only way we know we can, in take precautionary measures, and everybody must be required. That might have made sense 200 years ago, but in the year 2020, when we have the means to detect viruses and we've got the human genome has been mapped, so we know exactly. You can test who's a father and who's a mother of somebody, who's related to who. We have the means. Now, they said in March and April, well, the problem is we don't have enough testing kits to be able to test. We can only test a few, like the politicians. The important people can get tested, but everybody else, there's not enough testing kits. So that's why we have to social distancing and this and shut down everything and quarantine all this shit because we don't have enough kits. But 6 months later, there are enough kits. 6 months later, they can test every single person on the planet if they wanted to. Why aren't they? That's the relevant question. Why are they making us be paranoid of each other instead of the rational, logical response, if there really was truly a threat in the first place, a real threat? The logical, rational response was, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, 2020, we've come to a severe crisis period in history where we have to take some extreme, drastic measures, which what they've done this year. They've taken extreme, drastic measures, shutting everything down, quarantine this, that, and the other. But if there was actually if it was a genuine threat that we were facing, wouldn't the rational response be, you know what, we have to take the drastic measures of, drum roll please, everybody has to get tested to see if they have the virus. And those who have tested positive, that the tests legitimately give the legitimate results, not faked results, but legitimate actual results of those people who are carrying the virus, supposedly so deadly that everybody has to be afraid of it. Cooties! Everyone that would test positive would be immediately placed under quarantine, no questions asked. Everyone else who tests negative can go about their normal lives like normal human beings. And before very long whatsoever, by isolating and quarantining everybody who's carrying the virus, it will be pretty well eradicated. And the rest of us could go on living our normal lives like normal human beings. But they're not doing that, and you must ask yourself the relevant, pertinent question, why are they not doing that? I have the answer to that. You don't want to hear it because you're going to dismiss it with the officially sanctioned term that dismisses any kind of dissent. Any kind of dissent is officially dismissed by the officially coined dismissal phrase, which is conspiracy theorist. Oh, conspiracy theorist. Oh, conspiracy theorist. Because you said something doesn't go along with the program of the officially sanctioned commands from these faceless, nameless dictators. Who the hell are they? We don't know. Somebody says, well, it's the law now, and the cops are going to go enforce it, no matter whether it is a law or not. As long as the cops believe that it's a law and believe it and are told specifically by their bosses, it's your job to go out and bust people for this, that, or the other, they're going to do it. Because cops are definitely obedient robots. And our soldiers are definitely our number one obedient killer robots. Don't question anything, just go. Ours is just to do and die. So the real reason why they are not taking the rational, pragmatic approach that I've just described of testing everybody and quarantining those that have the virus and letting everyone else live their normal lives is because that's not what they want, and that's not what it's all about anyhow. It's just a concocted, phony hoax, a pseudo-medical pretext for them to impose worldwide fascism, fascist dictatorship. That's all it's about. And they want to keep us afraid. They don't want to inform us. They don't want to find out who has the virus and who doesn't, because that would eliminate the element of random fear. But what they want is the chaos created by everybody being afraid of everybody because of something invisible that they can't see. And if they just tested everybody and found out, and they would give, badges to those people that were tested clean, and as long as you were walking around and you had a thing that says this test's clean, I don't have the virus, then you're okay. They don't want that because that's not their agenda.